My 5-year-old son's pre-surgery appointment. I asked why his operation had been canceled. My wife took a deep breath. I used his surgery money to pay my mother's medical bills. She was all alone. I had no choice. I just looked at her. That's interesting. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Deacon Ross had spent 11 years riding in the back of an ambulance, and the job had taught him exactly what panic looks like. He had seen it in parking lots and kitchens and on the shoulder of Highway 61 in a whiteout, and he could tell you that real panic has a smell, sharp and electric like a wire about to burn. But the job had taught him the opposite thing, too. It had taught him what it looks like when a person has already done all their panicking in private, quietly, weeks ago, and all that is left on the outside is calm. That was what Deacon carried into the clinic on a gray Tuesday in March. Calm. His wife mistook it for stupidity. It was the last big mistake she ever made at his expense, and she made it out loud, in a waiting room, in front of a witness she had picked herself. He was a paramedic in Duluth, Minnesota, where Lake Superior decides the weather and the weather decides everything else. He had grown up there, in a small house that shook when the plows went by, raised by a father who drove one of those plows for 31 years and believed that most of life came down to one simple arrangement. The storm gets one night. Then you clear the road. Deacon's son was named Milo. He was 5 years old, all elbows and questions, and he had been born with a small hole in his heart. A ventricular septal defect, the cardiologist called it, drawing it on a napkin in the family consult room, as if Deacon had not already read about it 40 times at 3 in the morning with the lamp low, so his wife could sleep. Most of those holes close on their own in the first years. Milo's did not. It was not an emergency, the doctors said, but it needed to be repaired before it started stealing from him. His breath first, then his energy, then his growth. Get it done this spring, the surgeon had said back in January, and he'll be climbing trees by July. Milo did not fully understand any of it, which was a mercy. He knew his heart had a little door that didn't shut right. That was the phrase the nurse had given him, and he had adopted it completely. He told people the doctors were going to fix his door, and after that he would be allowed to play hockey like his cousin Aiden. He told everyone. He told the mailman. He told the dog. He told the moose. The moose was a stuffed animal, worn soft and lopsided, and according to Milo, Moose had the same condition. A door in his heart that needed fixing. They were scheduled together, Milo said. Same day, same doctor. It was all arranged. The money for the surgery sat in a savings account the family called the Door Fund, and it matters for everything that came after to know exactly what was inside it. $28,000, which was the family's share after insurance, plus the travel, plus the unpaid weeks Deacon would take to sit beside a hospital bed. 2 full years of his overtime shifts were in that account. Nights and doubles and holidays, every extra run he could pick up. A bake sale and a brat fry that his station crew had thrown without being asked, folding tables in the station bay, and a coffee can that came back stuffed with bills. Donations from the church's mother had belonged to all her life. And $14,000 of life insurance from his father, who had died the winter Milo was born and never got to meet him. The plow driver's last handoff. The last thing the old man ever gave his grandson. Remember the Door Fund. The whole story lives inside it. The night of the brat fry, Deacon had stood in the station bay with a spatula in one hand, watching half the neighborhood file past the folding tables, and his partner Reyes had elbowed him and pointed at the coffee can. It was stuffed so full someone had rubber banded a second can to it. Old men from the church came through and paid $20 for a $5 plate and waved off the change. A kid from Milo's preschool emptied a sandwich bag of quarters into the can with both hands, formal as a ring bearer. Deacon had needed to go stand in the equipment room for a few minutes after that, between the backboards and the spare oxygen bottles, until his face worked right again. That was what was in the account. Not just money. A whole town's worth of cupped hands. He and Whitney had met 12 years earlier, the way half of Duluth meets, at a wedding of people neither of them stayed friends with. She was quick and funny, and she could read a room faster than anyone he had ever met, and he mistook that, for years, for warmth. It took him a decade to understand that reading a room and caring about the people in it are two entirely different skills, and that his wife had only ever been issued the first one. She was the one who named the door fund. Actually, she wrote it on the deposit slip the day they opened it and drew a little heart next to it, and Deacon had carried that deposit slip in his wallet for a year like a photograph. He thinks about that slip sometimes. The same hand that drew that heart typed the transfer that emptied the account. People will tell you handwriting shows character. It doesn't. It only shows practice. Deacon's wife handled the money. Her name was Whitney, and that had been their split for 9 years. He pulled the shifts. She ran the accounts. It worked the way it works in half the houses on any street, and for 9 years Deacon never once checked her math, because you do not audit the person you share a bed with. That is not wisdom. It is just what he believed on the first Monday of March, and stopped believing forever on the second. Because on the second Monday of March, his cell phone rang while he was restocking the rig at the end of shift, and a billing coordinator named Renee was on the line, friendly and procedural, calling about the canceled procedure. She thought she was calling to confirm the cancellation paperwork. Canceled, Deacon said. The payment was withdrawn and the date was released, Renee said. And then, into his silence, more carefully, she said, Mr. Ross, you didn't know. Here is the thing about Deacon's job, the thing that saved him in that moment and in every moment after. When the call comes in, you do not get to fall apart. You check the airway. So he checked the airway. He kept his voice level. He thanked Renee for the call, and he asked her one question. Where had the refunded deposit been sent? She read him an account number, and it was not theirs, not his, not anything he had ever seen in his life. Then he sat in his truck in the station parking lot for 1 hour, with the heater ticking and the snow coming sideways off the lake, and he opened 9 years of trust the way he would open a patient's shirt. Fast and all the way, because half measures help no one. The door fund was gone. Not dented. Not borrowed against. Gone. Drained across 4 months in withdrawals that told a story once you laid them out in a row. And Deacon was a man whose whole career was reading a scene from the doorway. A hotel in Bloomington, 11 stays, always on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tuesdays and Thursdays were her yoga nights. Restaurants in a suburb of the Twin Cities they had no reason to ever visit. 2 payments to a marina up the shore for winter storage on a boat the Ross family did not own. A men's watch from a jeweler in Minneapolis, $2,100. And then the last big transfer, $9,000, dated February 12th, to the same unknown account where his son's surgery deposit had gone to die. He sat there with the phone in his hand and let the picture assemble itself, because it only went together one way. His wife had a boyfriend. The boyfriend had a boat. And his son's heart surgery, his dead father's last gift, had paid the man's marina fees. Deacon did not remember driving home that night. He remembered standing in Milo's doorway at midnight, watching the boy sleep with Moose clamped under one arm, listening to him breathe. If you knew what to listen for, and Deacon knew, you could hear it. The faint extra sound in it. The little door, swinging. He stood there a long time, and somewhere in that hallway, between one breath and the next, the part of him that wanted to wake the whole house up screaming lay down, and the part of him that ran calls stood up and took over. It never sat back down again. He did not blow the doors off. He wants that understood when the story gets told, and he wants the reason understood too, because it is not that he is a gentleman. It is that 11 years of scenes had drilled one rule into him deeper than any other. Secure the patient first, then deal with the cause. The patient was a 5-year-old boy with a hole in his heart and a surgery date that no longer existed. Whitney was just the cause. Causes can wait. Patients cannot. So the next morning, Deacon made 2 calls. The first call turned into a week of calls, made from his truck in the station lot with a notebook braced on his knee, the same way he ran a cardiac call. Airway, breathing, circulation. The hospital's financial counseling office first, where a tired, kind woman walked him through the charity care program and did not ask the question her eyes were asking, which was how a 2-income family loses a fully funded surgery in 4 months. Then his union rep, who listened for 90 seconds and said, "We had an emergency medical fund. Why do you think we pay dues? Send me the paperwork tonight." Then his captain, who moved his shifts around without being asked twice and said only, "Whatever you need," and family means the station too, you know that. It took 4 days. By Friday, Milo Ross had a new surgery date, 3 weeks out, fully covered between the charity program and the union fund. The little door would be fixed on schedule after all. Nobody knew. Not the school. Not the neighbors. Especially not Whitney. The surgery was safe, and that changed the arithmetic of everything, because a man whose child is safe can afford to be patient. And patient was the most dangerous thing Deacon Ross knew how to be. The second call was to Dorothy. Dorothy was Whitney's mother. Everyone within 40 miles called her Dot. She was 72 years old, sharp as a filleting knife, and she lived alone up the shore in 2 harbors in the house her late husband had built, where she split her own firewood and shoveled her own roof, which tells you everything about her that matters. Deacon had liked her from the first day, and she had liked him in the wary way of a woman who had watched her daughter chew through 2 boyfriends and a first husband before him. He called her on a Wednesday evening, and he kept it easy and roundabout. How was she doing? How was the house? How was her health? Whether anything was weighing on her lately. Whether she was managing all right up there. Money-wise. Doctor-wise. There was a pause on the line, and then Dot said, "Deacon Ross, I have not seen a doctor since October, and that was a flu shot at the pharmacy. Why in God's name are you talking to me like a hospice pamphlet?" "No reason, Dot." She said. It was a sound with a whole cross-examination folded inside it. And then she said the thing that told Deacon his last faint hope was dead. The hope that some sliver of the story might be true. "You know, my own daughter has not called me in 2 months. 2 months. Not a call, not a card. You tell her I said so." Deacon looked out the windshield at the snow coming off the lake for a moment. "You know what, Dot," he said. "Why don't you tell her yourself? Milo's got his big pre-surgery appointment on Tuesday. He would love his grandma there. It would mean the world to him." "Then I'll be there," said, immediately, no daylight between the words. Wouldn't miss it for anything on this earth. He hung up and sat in the quiet cab, and he said it out loud for the first time, alone, to the steering wheel, in the voice he would use 6 days later in a cardiology waiting room. "That's interesting," he said. "That's very interesting." The 6 days between that call and the appointment were the strangest of Deacon's life, because he had to live inside his own house like a man visiting a museum of it. He ate dinners across from her. He listened to her tell a long story about a co-worker's kitchen renovation. He watched her kiss Milo goodnight and read him the dinosaur book with all the voices, and the performance was so seamless, so complete, that twice he caught himself doubting the bank records he had photographed, the way you doubt your own eyes at the end of a long shift. That is the true damage people like Whitney do, he understood later. Not the money. The money is countable. It is that they make you audit your own memory, every good year of it, wondering which parts were real. He slept in Milo's room twice that week, on the floor, telling the boy it was a campout. It was not a campout. It was just the only room in the house where everything was exactly what it claimed to be. The pre-surgery appointment had lived on the kitchen calendar for 2 months. Whitney's handwriting, a small heart drawn over the date in red pen. There is a particular kind of laugh a man laughs at midnight, alone in his garage, looking at a photograph of a calendar square with a little red heart on it, and it is not a sound anyone should have to hear twice. She did not know the appointment should have died when the payment did. That was her blind spot, and Deacon had turned it over for days until he understood it. She had unraveled the money months ago, quietly, transfer by transfer. But the calendar kept running on its own momentum, school pickups and swim lessons and appointment reminders, and she had to keep performing the wife and the mother on top of the theft, smiling through the days until she was ready for whatever her next move was going to be. Deacon never did find out exactly what the next move was. A filing, probably. A story where she was the frightened one. It did not matter anymore. She never got to make it. So on Tuesday morning, Whitney dressed Milo in his dinosaur sweater. She packed apple slices in a zip bag. She reminded him to bring Moose, because Moose had the same appointment. And in the elevator up to cardiology, she took Deacon's hand and squeezed it, and Deacon looked down at their hands together and felt nothing move in him at all, and understood that whatever had lived there once had already been pronounced. He let her hold it. Securing the patient sometimes means letting the scene stay calm. The elevator opened. Milo ran ahead of them into the waiting room, Moose swinging by one leg, and stopped dead in the middle of the carpet. Grandma, she was in the corner chair in her good wool coat, the one that came out for weddings and funerals, and her arms were already open. Milo crossed the room like a small green missile and hit her chest first, and she folded him up and kissed the top of his head, and over the top of that head her eyes found Deacon's. Pleased first, and then, reading something in his face that she could not name, curious, that had raised children and buried a husband and survived 72 North Shore winters. She could smell weather coming better than the radio could. Deacon was not watching that. He was watching his wife. He had watched 1,000 faces receive bad news, and he would say this for Whitney. She was good. The delight arrived on her face almost instantly. Mom, what a surprise. The hug looked warm from any angle in the room. But there's a small muscle at the hinge of the jaw that does not take direction, has never taken direction in the history of the human face, and Deacon watched it jump. Her mother. Here. The alibi, sitting in the room, wearing her funeral coat and holding the grandson whose surgery money was gone. He could almost hear the machinery behind Whitney's eyes recalculating, rerouting, checking exits. Deacon invited me, said, warm as July, hugging her daughter. Wouldn't miss my grandson's big day. Of course, Whitney said. Of course. They sat. Milo gave Grandma the full medical briefing, his and Moose's both. Same day, same doctor. Both doors fixed by summer, and after that, hockey. Listened with total attention, asking the follow-up questions the briefing deserved, and Whitney sat with her purse in her lap like a woman balancing something on her knees that no one else could see. Then the scheduler called the family to the desk. She was young, and she looked at her screen, and she frowned the exact frown Deacon had been waiting 4 days to see aimed at someone other than himself. I'm so sorry, she said. I'm showing the procedure was canceled. The payment was withdrawn last month, and the date was released. Were you not notified? The waiting room did not go silent, not really. The fish tank hummed. A toddler 2 rows back negotiated loudly with a granola bar. But for the 4 people standing at that desk, the air changed pressure. Deacon turned to his wife, and in a voice as level as a stretcher, he asked the question he already knew every single answer to. Whitney, why was Milo's operation canceled? She took a deep breath, and he will give her this too, always. It was a good performance. She had clearly built it for some version of this moment. She simply had not built it for this seating chart. I didn't want to tell you like this, she said. Her voice trembled at the right places. Her eyes filled at the right depth. I used his surgery money to pay my mother's medical bills. She was all alone up there, Deacon. She was drowning in them, and she was too proud to ask anyone for help. I had no choice. The scheduler looked down at her keyboard the way people do when a scene starts in front of them. Deacon just looked at his wife. He let the sentence finish echoing. He wanted every word of it out in the air, complete, witnessed on the record of the room. That's interesting, he said. Deacon, please. No, it's interesting, he said, because your mother's sitting right behind you. He had been on scenes where the ground physically gave way beneath people. A collapsed deck in Lakeside. A rotted staircase in an old duplex off 4th Street. And he could tell you that the sound a person makes when the floor goes is not a scream, not at first. It is a single sharp intake of air, the body understanding 1/2 second before the mind does. Whitney made that exact sound and turned around, that rose out of her chair slowly. One hand stayed resting on Milo's shoulder, light as a leaf, and the boy, sensing weather the way children and dogs do, went quiet against her coat. Everything about her face had gone from July to January. What bills? That said. It was not a question. It was an indictment being read. Whitney Marie. What medical bills? I split my own wood. I shovel my own roof. I have not owed a doctor $1 since your father died. Each sentence landed like a plow blade dropping on pavement. You took that baby's surgery money, and you hunted on me? Mom, that boy has a hole in his heart, Beth said, and her voice cracked exactly once in the middle of the sentence and came back twice as hard. Where's the money? And Whitney Ross, wife, mother, treasurer of the Door Fund, stood in a cardiology waiting room with her lying dead on the carpet between them, and said nothing. The same nothing they always say when the script runs out. Deacon let the nothing stretch until it had been fully heard by everyone present. Then he did the cruelest thing he did that entire day. He took out his phone, opened the banking app, scrolled to the history, and set the phone down gently on the counter, facing her mother. Hotels, restaurants, a marina, a watch. Dot read for a long moment. Her thumb moved once, twice, scrolling. The waiting room fish tank hummed. And then she looked up at her daughter with an expression Deacon hoped, sincerely, that no human being would ever aim at him as long as he lived. Who is he? Dot said. Whitney's mouth opened and closed. In the corner of the waiting room, a nurse had quietly taken Milo by the hand to go look at the fish tank, the way good nurses simply know, and Deacon filed that kindness away with all the others he owed. The scheduler had stopped pretending to type. Dot picked up her coat off the chair, folded it over her arm, and stood very straight. And when she spoke again, her voice had gone quiet, which anyone who knew her could have said was the worst possible sign. 68 years I have carried this family's name through this town, she said. Your father paid cash at the hardware store his whole life, so no man could ever say a Kowalski owed him. And you spent your son's heart. And when it came time to answer for it, out of every excuse in the world, you reached for me. She shook her head slowly. I'd have given you the money, you know, if you'd asked me. If it had ever once been real, I'd have sold the truck. That of everything said in that waiting room was the sentence that finally made Whitney cry for real. Because it was true, and everyone standing there knew it was true, and it made the whole architecture of the lie not only cruel but pointless. Dot turned to Deacon. Bring my grandson up to me Sunday, she said. I'm making a roast. And then she walked to the fish tank, kissed Milo's head, told him Moose was the bravest patient she had ever met, and left, spine straight, coat over her arm, 72 years old and taller than everyone in the building. Whitney went with anger in the end. They usually do. Deacon had learned when the tears hit the floor and bounce. In the corridor outside the waiting room, with the nurses politely finding reasons to be elsewhere, she turned on him in a whisper like a blade coming out of a sheath. He was never home. That was the first one. The money was half hers. That was the second. He had humiliated her in public, in front of her mother, in front of strangers. That was the third and loudest. And then the last one, the one Deacon would keep in a drawer in his mind forever and take out whenever he needed to remember exactly who he had been married to. You don't understand what it's like to need something for yourself. He let her finish. All of it. He had learned patience in the back of an ambulance and perfected it in the last 2 weeks, and he spent it now like a man who had plenty. And when she was done, breathing hard in the fluorescent hush, he told her the part she did not know. Milo's surgery is in 19 days, he said. It's paid for. It was resecured a week before you walked into this building. Charity Care, the union's emergency fund. My crew moved my shifts. While you were checking hotel reviews, I was on the phone with billing. He watched it land. He watched her rebuild the timeline behind her eyes. Fast, frantic, the way he had rebuilt it in a truck cab 3 weeks earlier. You didn't cancel his surgery, Whitney, he said. You only tried to. There's a legal difference. You'll be hearing about it. And then, for 1 second, 1 single second in 11 years of marriage, the mask came all the way off, and Deacon saw the true face do the true math. If he knew about the money, and he knew about her mother, and he had known long enough to quietly rebuild an entire surgery through 2 institutions, then he had known for weeks. And if he had known for weeks and said nothing and invited her mother to the appointment, then what else did he have? What else had he built? Deacon, she said very quietly. What did you do? Secured the patient, he said. Now we deal with the cause. The boyfriend's name was Jesse Colburn, 39 years old. He sold dock equipment and marina memberships up and down the North Shore. And he was the kind of easy-laughing, firm handshake man who is permanently about to be rich next summer. The boat in winter storage, the storage Milo's heart had paid for, was not even fully his. The bank owned most of it. The $2,100 watch was on his wrist in half the photos Deacon's lawyer pulled. And here is what Whitney learned about Jesse Colburn within a month. And Deacon confesses freely that he did nothing at all to soften the landing. The business expansion she had wired the last $9,000 into, the transfer that had killed her son's surgery deposit, was not an investment and never had been. It was a debt payment. Jesse owed money up and down the shore, and some of it to people considerably less patient than a hospital billing office. Whitney had not been his partner. She had been his liquidity. And when Deacon's lawyer froze what was left of the joint accounts and the letters started arriving, and it got around town, the way everything gets around a town like that, exactly what the stolen money had been for: a 5-year-old's heart surgery, a dead-plowed driver's life insurance, church donations, and a coffee can, Jesse Colburn did what men like Jesse Colburn do when the tide drops and the hull shows. He moved to Grand Forks before the ice was off the lake. He did not take Whitney with him. He did not even take the boat. She had emptied her son's door fund for a man who stopped returning her calls by May. The legal part, Deacon will tell you, required no genius and no cruelty. That is the part people miss about stories like his. He never needed revenge. He needed paperwork. And Deacon Ross had never once in his adult life lost a paperwork fight. The divorce was filed with the affair documented and the bank records attached, every withdrawal dated and matched to a hotel folio or a marina invoice, and mediation lasted 4 hours. There was nothing to argue about. The settlement clawed her share down until the door fund was made whole, dollar for dollar, his father's $14,000 included. But the weight, the real weight, came from the donated money. Because the station fundraiser and the church collection had gone into that account earmarked for a child's medical care. And spending earmarked charitable funds on a boyfriend is not a marital dispute. It is theft by swindle under Minnesota law, and the county attorney, a father of 4, agreed with some enthusiasm. Whitney avoided a trial by taking the plea: full restitution, 3 years of probation, and a felony record that would ride along quietly into every job interview for the rest of her life, the way a plow blade rides behind the truck even in summer. Her lawyer had wanted character witnesses. That was the problem. The woman who would have stood up for her, the woman who had stood up for her every single day of her life through the 2 boyfriends and the first husband and everything else, was sitting on the other side of the courtroom, in her good wool coat, next to Deacon, holding his jacket while he testified. Dot's statement to the court was 11 words long. Deacon has it memorized, and he expects he always will. I was never sick. My daughter made me her alibi. Twice, because the plea investigation had turned over one more stone. A smaller lie from a year before, a loan for Mom's roof for $1,000, that Deacon had approved without blinking because of course he had. Dot's roof, like her woodpile and her health and her pride, had never needed anyone's help. That money had been Jesse too. The affair was older than anyone had guessed. The alibi had been load-bearing from the start. Custody followed the money and the record, the way water follows grade. Milo lives with his father. Whitney has supervised visits, 2 hours, twice a month, in a bright room with toys that smell like disinfectant. And the judge, a grandmother herself, added one line to the order personally, in her own words from the bench. The respondent shall hold no financial authority of any kind over the minor child. No accounts, no funds, nothing with his name on it, ever again. Milo asked about his mother exactly once during those weeks at bedtime, with Moose tucked under his chin. Is Mommy mad at us? Deacon had promised himself, in the truck, in the courthouse, in every quiet moment when the anger tried to climb into the driver's seat, that whatever else happened, he would never once make the boy carry a single pound of it. So he smoothed Milo's hair back and told him the truth, cut down to a 5-year-old size, which is a skill his job had also taught him. Nobody's mad at you, bud. Not one person in this whole world. Mommy made some big mistakes with grown-up things, money things, and grown-ups have to fix their own mistakes before they can come back around. That's the rule for everybody, even mommies. Milo considered this with the enormous seriousness of the very young. Then he said, like Moose when he chewed the remote, and Deacon said, exactly like that, and the boy nodded, satisfied that the universe had consistent laws, and went to sleep. It was, Deacon thought, standing in the doorway, the most honest conversation anyone had had in that house in over a year. The surgery happened on a gray Thursday in April. Half of B shift showed up in the family lounge around noon. Off duty, in civilian clothes that made them all look weirdly smaller, carrying gas station coffee and a balloon shaped like a shark because the store was out of mousse. Reyes claimed they had all just happened to be in the neighborhood. The whole row of them sat there not reading magazines for 2 hours. Deacon never said thank you out loud, because they'd have made fun of him for a decade. But he knew what it was. It was the coffee can again, standing up on its own legs. Deacon knew operating rooms from the wrong end of the gurney, so he knew precisely how routine a VSD repair is, knew the numbers cold, knew the surgeon had done hundreds. He sat in the family lounge and believed none of it for 4 straight hours, the way every parent believes none of it. Dot sat beside him the entire time with her purse squared on her knees. Somewhere around hour 2, without a word, she reached over and took his hand and did not let go until the doors opened, and neither of them ever mentioned it afterward, and neither of them ever forgot it. Whitney was not there, not out of cruelty, out of consequence. Supervised visitation does not include surgical waiting rooms, and the woman who had spent the door fund learned the repair had been rescheduled the way the rest of the town learned things that spring. Afterward, the surgeon came out at 20 to 2 wearing the face they only wear when it went clean. She crouched to Deacon's eye level because she was good at her job all the way through, and she used the official terminology. The door, she said, is shut. Milo woke up groggy in the recovery bay an hour later, blinking at the ceiling, and found his father with his eyes, and did what 5-year-olds do, which is take inventory of the whole world in order of importance. "Daddy, is Moose okay?" "Moose came through it great," Deacon said. "Textbook. Is Grandma here?" "Grandma, is getting you a popsicle." "Red." "She fought a vending machine for it." Milo nodded, satisfied, the roster confirmed, every name accounted for. And he drifted back under, and that was the whole list. That was everyone he asked for. Deacon sat there beside the bed in the beeping dim, and he did not cry about the marriage, not then or ever. But he put his head down on the rail of his son's bed for a minute, listening to a heartbeat with nothing extra in it, no little doors swinging, just the clean shut and open of a lock that finally fit. And if his eyes were wet when Dot came back with the popsicle, she had the grace to blame the vending machine. It is July now. There's a scar down the middle of Milo's chest, already fading toward a thin white line, and he shows it to absolutely everyone as proof that his door shuts right. The mailman has seen it. The dog has seen it twice. Moose, whose own door was repaired the same day with a needle and thread by Grandma Dot, matching scar and all, is doing fine. Last Saturday, Milo skated for the first time at the summer rink over in West Duluth. Ankles wobbling, arms out like a tightrope walker, Duck gripping the boards and hollering like it was the state final. He fell 11 times. Deacon counted, 11 times down, 11 times up, and his heart, which now keeps every single beat it makes, never once asked him for a break. Deacon's father drove a plow for 31 years, and the old man used to say the whole job came down to one arrangement, and Deacon finds he thinks about it most days now. The storm gets one night. Then you clear the road. Whitney was the storm. She got her night. Then Deacon cleared the road, all of it, every lane, and his boy went through, heart first, wide open, the little door swinging shut behind him, exactly the way it was built to.